senior officers of the Senate, Senator Nigerians who have Justice Kachikwu, who is now deceased.
I do. We do have them sometimes. Have this visual challenge. We'll probably sort it out as fast as possible. Kachikwu is currently the group managing director of the NNPC. His nomination from Delta State suggests that he probably will remain in the. He has always done oil and the petroleum subsector. The questions expected will probably also revolve around that. Minister of State for petroleum resources, since the president has said that he's going to superintend over that ministry, maybe, but we'll wait for the signal to be okay. But just before that, let me go to the lawyer amongst us here, the Dean of the Faculty of Law, University of Abuja, Kazim Waziri. What did you see of what we have seen so far?
Well, we've seen capacity in display in terms of those that will be appointed by the president.
Were you expecting anything more or less from Fashola?
You can't exhaust Fashola. You can't exhaust him. You can't exhaust him. And this is what I think consistently some of us have been saying. We don't want to know how long anybody has been around. We only care about the patriotism and the capacity of the person, because this nation needs to be salvaged. We shouldn't forget from where we are coming from. And I think the president is assembling from what we are seeing so far. You understand me?
Yes.
It's assembling. And what they need is supervision, and the president and his team has capacity to supervise them to deliver. So I'm glad.
Well, we have him really running. A lawyer, a senior advocate of Nigeria, somebody who ran Lagos State. Beyond the 8 years he stayed there, was chief of staff to Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and he stayed long enough, saw the tax grow, the IGR grow, the massive infrastructural development that happened in Lagos State, the turnaround of Oshodi, and a lot of other things that happened. Yeah. Where are we expecting him? Where some persons say, the Attorney General of the Federation.
I'm not expecting, I'm praying that Tinubu should be taken to FCT.
And that is
because since we
Fashola,
sorry, I'm sorry. Since El-Rufai left FCT, for those who are staying here, we are in constant frustration that look, this beautiful city has been abandoned, because I have, with due respect to those who came after El-Rufai, I do not see them having the capacity to really understand how to run a modern city, and they have having the willpower to do it. People are busy expanding and then distributing land. FCT is not about distributing land. It's about planning for the city in the next 20 years and what we do. You understand me? And that's what El-Rufai came. Some of us stopped using our cars. We were using El-Rufai taxis. You understand me? To even travel to our villages. And what have we, all those things packed. And what have we. So we need someone with genuinity, who has vision, who has someone who can put in his thinking head and salvage this beautiful city that belongs to all of us.
I believe some persons will also look at the judiciary. They will look at the judiciary and say, I think we need somebody. We should see somebody like that that will come to justice ministry and say, look, where do you think he's from what you have seen of him now? Where do you think the president might be working?
You see,
maybe let's find out. It's like the signals are back. Let's find out what's happening.
See, from where you have not been elevated to where, if confirmed, will be a member of the Federal Executive Council. Doctor, there is one issue
Order, please. Order, please.
very, very important to us in this chamber. The issue of JVCs. We have raised this on this floor repeatedly, and no useful answers have been proffered. JVCs, we want to ask, are they applicable within the OPEC countries only, or applicable to other countries that produce oil but they are not members of OPEC? I ask you this because we understand that these funds are supposed to be used in the training of Nigerians. You want to enhance the capacity of Nigerians in that industry. Everything that has a beginning must have an end. Do we have to continue to train and train and train and train Nigerians, given the fact that many of you are serving multinationals? Many Nigerians are now fully engaged in the oil industry, and the funds allocated are huge. When do we phase out this completely? Remember General Abacha phased out this, and yet the industry was functioning. Number two, emergency power projects. This project was conceived in 2005 by the federal government, and all the tiers of government bought into this. We contributed huge sums of money. This project was supposed to produce, at the end of the day, 6,000 megawatts of power. This project was supposed to utilize gas, which we have in abundance. Terminal date of delivery was what? December 2007. Production of 6,000 megawatts to the national grid. We are in 2015. I left office in 2007. By fluctuation of time, when I was governor, I left in 2007. We still don't have that. We've been told, rightly or wrongly, Train 1 is not ready. Train 2 is engaged. Train 3 is supposed to be sold to this group. Train 4 is this. Train 5 is under construction. We don't know which is which, but funds have been put into this. We want to know precisely what the problem is. And finally, by the powers conferred on this Senate, in fact the National Assembly, we can summon any minister to appear before us in the course of our investigation, in the course of our oversight functions. Give us your word here. When invited, would you attend? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Anjoba.
They will not attend you.
Mr. President, most distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Anjoba, representing only the good people of Anambra State. Well, you know where they are. Mr. Nominee, congratulations. And I would like to congratulate your patriotism, because going through your CV, for you to want to serve as a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria shows that you want to help your fatherland. My question is, you were just appointed over 6 weeks ago as GMD of NNPC. In what state did you find NNPC, and why has the corporation continued to be such a failed company? And number two, what are you doing to enshrine transparency and refocus the corporation? And number three, what changes have you made in your short period that you came in as GMD NNPC?
Thank you.
Senator Danjuma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Mohammed Enzuma Broje, representing Government Central and Government State. Mr. Nominee, looking through your background as somebody who has served very well in the private sector and oil industry, and your short stay as the GMD of NNPC, I have just two very simple questions. Number one, using your experience and your intellect, would you tell this chamber and Nigerians whether you have a solution, permanent solution to this perennial but occasional and almost regular scarcity of PMS and kerosene? In the case of kerosene, would you tell us how you will ensure that the people for which this kerosene is being given, the local, the downtrodden, get this product at affordable price? That's the first question. The second question is, there's this issue of PIB, Petroleum Industry Bill, which has been lingering from the 6th Senate to the 7th Senate. And I happen to be a member of one of the committees responsible for that PIB. And there's this story making around that there are so many versions of PIBs between the National Assembly and the Executive. The question is, would you now produce your own version, your own revised draft PIB for submission to National Assembly, or are you going to rely on what's already been submitted by your predecessor? Thank you.
Dr. Kachikwu, you take those sets of questions.
Let me start in no particular order. Questions last given by Senator Danjuma. Scarcity of PMS and kerosene, will that continue? What are my recipes for solving this? It is going to be taken in a wider dimension. First, there's a firm commitment, I can say that to you, that we would work to ensure that the sort of scarcity that you see and the lineages that you find in the pump islands and pump stations would go. I think that in the last 6 weeks since I walked into an NPC, you're only beginning to see pockets of that in the last 1-2 days. And that is not because of non-availability, that's because there was a rumor going around that we're trying to bring down the price of a PMS to 57 or 53 naira. And so everybody began to hoard to determine what exactly is the plan of government. We have come out very clearly to clarify that there's no such plan. Indeed, I'm sure you're all aware with the numbers that we face in terms of even subsidizing products at the current prices. So there is no such plan. And so I think that in the next 1-2 days, you'll find that individuals will open their stations and products are there. We have enough products storage in this country to last us for the next 40-50 days. So I do not expect that should be a problem. Now, in terms of how do you ensure it totally? The first is your refineries. Refineries are operating today at about 25-27% capacity. I know that there have been these old numbers bandied around to the fact that we were at the 65% performance levels, and that's not true, and I've advised His Excellency as such. My analysis over the last 6 weeks confirms a consistent, because the issue is not an upsurge issue. It is not that you do 65% in one day, then you do 0 tomorrow, then you do 25%. You take an average, and the performance levels are between 25 and 28%. Now, when I joined, the first thing I did was to put a clarion call to all the managers of our refineries. And I said, the success of your job depended on these refineries and how they work. If we can't run them, then we need to get out, make adequate arrangements to privatize them, and take them out. And in any case, whenever you don't run a refinery well, every barrel of crude that you send into that refinery produces, you send a $45 crude, or today $52 crude. You produce an income of roughly about $15 to $20. So from point one, you're already losing money. And so we've instituted a process of not giving crude to any refinery that is not producing properly. Now, I've given a 90-day program which is working, and I'm glad that over the last 3 weeks, Port Harcourt, for example, has come out of that battles and is producing right now at about 67% capacity. Our intent is to grow Port Harcourt all the way to about 70-75% capacity by the end of the year. So Port Harcourt is on that, and the prayer is that it continues. Now, Warri is beginning to signal that there's a likelihood they will come on stream, because right now both Warri and Port Harcourt, both Warri and Kaduna are short. Kaduna does not have an FCC problem yet. The difficulty was one of the pipelines. The pipelines were breached. We just finished the repairs on the pipelines. We're going to begin to pump crude into Kaduna refinery tomorrow, and hopefully over the next 4 or 5 days they will get the stock that they need, to get the plants kicking. We will then know whether they're in a position to continue to produce seamlessly above 65%. If any refinery produces below 60%, it's not production. Because the reality is that the performing capacities of refineries worldwide are in the 90% and above categories, and that is when you begin to make yields that turn into a profitable refinery. So we're hoping that Kaduna, when it starts, will at least begin to benchmark on what Port Harcourt is doing. What I have clearly as a mandate will be that at the end of December, when the 90 days is off, we'll sit down and say which ones have shown a capacity to consistently perform at levels that make optimal sense. And those ones will let's continue. We'll look at the management issues, tidy them up, look at the procurement issues and tidy them up. But those that are not, we'll have to shut down and do complete maintenance. Now let me go back to why refineries, however, are not producing, because all links to whether you will have PMS on a constant basis. The reality is that over the last 10 years, we have not really done a serious shutdown routine maintenance of the refineries. Most of these refineries are 30 years old and above. Now that's not that they can't work. Refineries have a lifespan of 50 to 60 years if you continue to maintain them constantly. But lack of maintenance has shut them down to points where they really cannot work. And our engineers have done a fantastic work of continuing to tinker like mechanics with every little part of the refinery to keep it going. So the simple answer to your PMS is refineries have to work. The other short answer, of course, is that you can continue to import. Now, the essence of an import is not only disgraceful to a country like Nigeria that has so much resources to be able to produce its own product, and with our neighboring countries like Chad and Ghana beginning to run their own refineries and produce product. But it's also the fact that the cost of imported products are exorbitant. And at the end of the day, the landed cost of imported products are far more than the authorized sale prices of these products. And right now, we're dealing with all kinds of cataclysmic effect of DAPMA and the rest of them who bring in products are owed huge arrears in terms of subsidy and would not want to continue the business unless subsidy is paid. So obviously, importation as a track forward will be something you want to fairly quickly find a way of getting out of. But in the short term, how can you ensure that? We have to get the refineries to work. We have to shut down the ones that can't work and get them maintained so that they can work better. We have to look at a fairly fast process to ensure that product is always there. And of course, finally, you've got to have strategic reserves. Now, these strategic reserves in most countries will carry products of between 6 months and 3 years. The United States keeps a strategic reserve at any given time of 2 years plus. But strategic reserves cost money. They cost money to build, they cost money to stock, they cost money to carry. And the carrying cost can be quite heavy. So unless your financial circumstances allow you to do that, that probably is not an immediate solution. The long-term solution really is to privatize as much as we can the whole rudiment of downstream sector performance. Because once you do that, people will go into the business for profit, they will do the investments that are required on a long-term basis, and you find solidity in terms of availability of these products. What we are doing right now is to continue to do an interim, holistic but firm and forecasted management in the sector to ensure that our citizens do not suffer. Kerosene is a different ball game. You will notice that only NNPC for now imports kerosene, and that is because it has, the sale prices are such that nobody can bring in kerosene and make money. As a matter of fact, 50% of NNPC's subsidy charges come from importation of kerosene. So the first thing is, how do you get kerosene easily available? Your refineries work. If your refineries work, they produce more kerosene. If you begin a good deforestation program, you can begin to slide our people away from kerosene. And so therefore, it is absolutely essential, for example, that gas goes all over the country. Next year, we're having a program that we're going to launch that will give, hopefully, free cylinders to every Nigerian citizen. Once we do that, we'll begin to say, how do we get gas to nearby depots closer to people? Because once we do that, we'll begin to move out from kerosene. But until we do that, kerosene is still the bread and butter of the average Nigerian family in terms of cooking and all that. And our duty will be to continue to produce that. And the president is very, very committed, to making sure that that product is available. For the very first time in very many years, you are seeing a situation where kerosene at least is being distributed at near control prices as much as possible, but it's at a loss component to NNPC. We've got to address that for continuity, because you can't continue to run that on a deficit basis. You've got to create an incentive where others are able to bring in kerosene and kerosene to ensure that it continues to flow. In terms of distribution, the majors and the minors, the dogman, all the rest of them, will gladly and freely and quickly and speedily move kerosene to all over the country, as long as it's available in the volumes that you require. So that's the short answer to that. We're working on it. We're working on policies. I've been there for 6 weeks. You begin to see some trending in terms of provision of kerosene in these stations at control prices. But we're working on a twin engine of being able to provide this product on a holistic long-term basis without suffering the sort of loss and causative factors that you see on a day-to-day basis. And then you also asked me about the PIB. Would I utilize the existing version? I think first of all, let me say that one of the things I've said to myself since resuming as GMD of NNPC is that I will not be constrained by the lack of PIB in making sure that holistic solutions to the industry continue to be propelled. So using existing laws, we've continued to make changes. We've continued to draft solutions. We've continued to tinker on. Because at the end of the day, whether or not PIB is available and passed really doesn't lie within the umbrella of the executive. It lies with this revered assembly. But I also do not think that the problem really with PIB has been the fact of the versions. I think by the time the last 6th Senate was running up its program, you had gotten a version that was clearly the version that both houses were looking at. Am I going to create a new version? Not really. I think what I will need to do is take the version that you have, look at it again, make changes. The key issues is that as long as we continue to want to pass a holistic PIB, it's going to be a very major challenge. But once you begin to break it up into critical aspects, you begin to make a faster run to passing PIB. Fiscal regimes, for example, you've got to ask yourself, why would you want to have fiscal regime, for example, inside the PIB? Because to change those fiscal regimes, which are a very dynamic environment, you have to come back to this assembly to also make changes. You must find a way of pulling out fiscal regimes, and leave them to existing tax laws which you can amend, and additionally look at the PSCs and the joint venture agreements and the tax laws to enable you to determine fiscal regime. The advantage in that is that you have the flexibility of changing with the times. At the times when oil prices are so low that nobody is willing to invest in your country, you may give some incentives. At the time when they're so high that people are making outrageous profit result, you may increase your taxes. But so long as you leave it in a holistic, blue-barreled type voluminous PIB, you are stuck in terms of how you're going to get the required votes each time to make amendments or tax. So I think the way to go is, first of all, take what is there. I don't believe in throwing away the baby with the bathwater. Take what is there, look at it in the context of where we are today. The oil price has slided since the time but if you count the time that the first versions of PIB went in and now, oil prices have moved from 70 to 90 to 120 and then back out to 45 and 50. Environments have changed, the considerations have changed. But the aspects of PIB that deal with organization, structure, administration, reorganization of the government agencies that are going to be responsible, for stewarding the oil industry are still as relevant as they were before. We can take those, the interests of communities are still as relevant as they were before. So we can take those, pass them fairly quickly so that we can have some level of certainty. I can tell you that the average source of volumes in investment that we're losing on an annual basis because of the lack of PIB is in excess of $15 billion a year. And the reason is simple. It would have been better that you didn't start at all. then announce very flamboyantly that you are going to do PIB and then step back from it. Because it creates a level of uncertainty that no international investor wants to grapple with. So I will urge this very revered Senate to fairly quickly come to terms, find a way working with us to go ahead and pass those elements of PIB where there's not much contention. Engagement is key. One of the key things that killed a previous bill was that there wasn't sufficient engagement. Our duty as individuals in the line of progress with you will be to go out there and have those engagements and hopefully submit to this Senate and to the National Assembly entirely suggestions that have come with people, things that people can live with, amendments that need to be made. Because once that engagement is there, and an engagement does not imply that you must at the end of the day accept the views of everything that is accepted. The experience in this room is enough for you people, for distinguished senators to go through that. But engagement is key, because at the end of the day, the trend that you're seeing is a northward trend towards foreign investment and external private sector investment in the sector. Government emphasis on investment is going to start sliding because of depreciating amounts of income. So that's that. I then had questions from distinguished Senator Ba saying 6 weeks ago, what was the state I met NNPC? And I'll classify this into the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, I would say, you have very well-trained staff who are there. You have lots of committed people who want to help and change leadership. And never mind all the stories we hear about this institution. It is sad, for example, that if you look through what happens, 80% of people who work there are above board. They're working hard. They're committed. They make no decisions. And you have a very small percentage who do the sort of things that have created very bad reputational issues. So there are good people in there. I met a lot of good people. I met people dying for leadership. Leadership is key. How much leadership can you give so that people believe in you and work with you? Because like any dynamic organization, the leader determines the mantra. So they were dying for leadership. I met people who understood what the problems were, and in most cases had spent so much in all kinds of consultancy services to identify the problem. But there was a fairly big lack of executive will to move forward with some of those challenges. Now, the advantage we have today is that we are in an era of a president who is committed, completely committed to seeing very fundamental changes in this sector. And every conversation I have with him every week is geared to how much more can you do? And so for the first time, I can very clearly say that my problem will not be the president. My problem will be myself, my ability to harness the capacity of those who are there to understand that change is absolutely inevitable and there's an urgency of now. So that's what I meant. Now, in terms of the bad, corruption was a major issue, still is. We're working very hard to try and wipe that out. I am sure that if you follow the trend since I joined, we've literally cut short every contract that we found suspicious. Now, and let me say this. When we cancel contracts, it is not a vote against personalities. It's a vote against the terms of those contracts. I'm not interested in who is doing the contract, but it must be transparent. The terms must yield the best values for this country. And so when I see people call me and say, why did you do this to me? It is not a personal issue. I'm not going to go and lift the crude. I'm not going to provide the services. But this country must get the very best value out of every contract that is issued out of the oil industry. We owe ourselves that. We owe the people who represent that. We owe the international community who continues to watch with trepidation that. And so that's where we're headed. Now, so the corruption was a problem, contracts were a problem definitely, structure was a problem. Over nearly 40% of the revenue that NNPC generates is utilized by NNPC for its own need. Indeed, if you look at the numbers for NNPC spends more than a lot of 3 or 4 or 5 states gathered together in terms of their annual budgets. So something has to give. A political will is also essential. So one of the things we've done is, for example, we've downsized tremendously at the upper level. We've moved from nine directorates, when you add the coordinating position, into about 4 or 5 directorates. We have literally removed from the system about 150 GGMs, and we'll slice that down to about 100 GGMs. We have moved general managers from a figure of about 180 to about 90 something. We're doing some very, very drastic cuts. But the problem is not just at top leadership. the problem is also at the bottom. And next week we're getting into the holistic item of looking at subsidiaries, because a lot of the business is run by subsidiaries. How much staff do you need to run a business? Now, that is going to be transplanted on an altar of what is an ongoing holistic reform process. What is NNPC going to turn out to be eventually? Will it be as big as it is now? Will it focus on areas where the private sector is better able to? Can we provide services in a manner that is efficient but yet cost efficient? Can we wipe out corruption, which takes about 10% really of the yield factors? Can we create an environment where the best Nigerians who have the capacity to do this business can get in, make an investment, and be sure the rewards will return to them? It is a whole mind-blowing exercise. But myself and my team are absolutely committed to making sure that this works. And if I do get the approval of this revered body and the appointments from the president, I intend to continue to pursue those drastic measures that I've done over the last 6 weeks to ensure that we get to where we're supposed to be. What steps am I taking to transform? I've already talked of contract cancellations. I've talked of restructuring. I've talked of value addition audit. We're getting out to the industry to work with the majors to be sure that we're getting the best value for the investments that we make.
Mr. President, South Senatorial District. Mr. Nominee, let me congratulate you on your nomination to this office. My question is simple, and it's only one question. We know that local content and the participation of Nigerians in the oil industry has been an issue that successive governments have grappled with. The local government, you have been around the world, and you know the local participation in the oil industry in other environments. What are your local content targets as Minister of Petroleum? And also, what will you do to achieve these targets? Maybe I'll ask a second question. You've had a lot of experience in the wide and multivariate experience in the private sector. Now you are coming into the public sector. What are the best practices, the corporate government traditions that you believe you will bring from the private sector to the public sector in order to transform the NNPC? Thank you.
While noting that also to note the question asked earlier by Dr. Akko, Senator Jazzy.
Thank you, Mr. Senate President. I want to welcome the Red Chambers, Dr. Kachikwu Ibe. We feel that you have a round peg, a round hole this time around, considering what we have already seen you've done in the past 6 weeks. You assume duty as the GMD of NNPC. We want also to say that since Mr. President has indicated his intention to be the substantive minister for petroleum, and you as if the Senate approves of your confirmation that you become a minister of state for the Minister of Petroleum, I want to ask how you are going to coordinate this. Have the ability to, you have the president who is a minister and yourself as a minister of state in terms of project delivery. That one. The other issue we want to ask that has been bothering the smooth operation of the industry is the lumped NNPC. And I'm happy also that in your NNPC 20 phases restructuring program here, you have them. That is the unbundling of NNPC for efficiency. We have had in the past so many people that have come before you come with the liberalization of the downstream sector, do one story after the other. But we have...
Senator, can you put the question so that...
Yes, Mr. State President, I'm going to do so. But I want to say that we have had motion without movement. And this is bothering us. And that's why so many of us here want to ask questions. Because we know that if we get it right with NNPC, the industry here, that a lot of our problems as a nation will be solved. And then I say, how are you going to do effectively? So, in fact and indeed, the unbundling of NNPC, so that you have one. Let me give you an example. You have BPMC.
Distinguished Senator, I think as I said, we need to do utmost respect to our colleagues. Put the question.
I'll do so shortly if I don't have so many interventions. So what I'm saying is that unbundling it so that you have different strata of the industry and differently. That's one. The other issue is that how do we remove government? Government from business. The private sector, the economy of this country must be private sector driven. But what we have found seen in the past is that the NNPC want to do most of the jobs. You have also seen in the downstream where you have filling stations that you have people that was past administration got into to take NNPC filling station all the places. You know how much you have lost in the process. So what I'm saying is, how do we allow the private sector to drive the industry? Then the NNPC doing regulatory job, trying to set the standards and get those things done so that this industry can move. If you do all this, for goodness sake, I think we are going to get things done. Then the other issue is that the pipelines, we have pipelines. We have the you are in charge, we find solution to the we meet with 21st century Nigeria, so that we stop having the problem of leakages. And then the coastal depots, we have the issue that the coastal depots in Warri, in Port Harcourt, in Calabar are not doing the job they are supposed to be doing. With the result that most of the imported petroleum products are taken to Lagos, and it's giving problem to people from the north central, northeast, and the other parts of the southeast coming to Lagos to take products. Whereas you have all the products, whereas what we should be expecting is the people from the other side to do the reverse. So what are you going to do to reverse this trend, to ensure that the coastal depots in the Warri, Port Harcourt, Calabar are all doing their job efficiently and to the success of this country? Thank you so much.
Senator Alashadra.
Order please. Thank you, distinguished senators. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have had the nominee talk beautifully about what he has been doing of recent to place NNPC in good stead. But sir, you have been part of the rot that has characterized NNPC and the oil industry from the past, maybe in the last 30 years. Now, what do you think you will do if you eventually become a minister of the Federal Republic in charge of the petroleum ministry that will change things? Because People had always talked beautifully when they are interviewed like this. But at the end of the day, you find that they are unable to really hit the nail on the head and deliver what we want. That's question number one. Question number two, oil subsidy. What is your take in its continuity or otherwise? And three, refineries. What do you think we should do to ensure that we have petroleum all the time? Because we have only talked about what we have here. What other innovations? Are you ready to get the private sector to invest in this so that while the national factories are going on well, the private factories can also join with them to ensure that we have, petroleum products all the time and efficiency comes into the system. Thank you very much.
Senator Rafi Ibrahim.
Mr. President, thank you very much, Mr. President,
Leader of the Senate.
I'm Rafi Ibrahim.
Leader of the Senate, Rafi Ibrahim, Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, first I want to move a motion that this Senate suspend all relevant sections of our rules for the extension of time so that we'll be able to continue. Mr. President, after my motion, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished President of the Senate. My colleagues, I want to second the motion that we do extend the time to enable this Senate continue with the screening exercise. But I take that privilege to urge the Senate President to look at this bench when it's possible. Yes, thank you,
Minority Leader, for your colorful contribution. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of extension, those against say nay, the ayes have it. We have to continue our sitting. Senator Rafi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Kachikwu, my question is very simple. I have your 20 fixes for NNPC, which I believe is 20 fixes for Nigeria petroleum industry. I can see that from our history, we have the issue of neglect of communities around the petroleum industry facilities. From your 20 fixes, there's nothing on corporate social responsibility, which in Nigeria as of today is not compulsory, it is still voluntary because there's no law binding companies to do minimum to their community. Can you tell us what you have as a reform in that area so that we will not go back to the days of agitation by our brothers in the Niger Delta region? Thank you very much.
Dr. Kachikwu, can you take these questions along with the also one that, as I said, Dr. Akumi has said earlier on?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Akumi did ask about the JVC funding and alluded to the fact that enough training had been done in the industry and the time had come for us to put that aside. Now, I think the reality is that as people come into the industry and train, they continue to move around. A lot of people we've had in the industry have moved on to their own personal businesses. So you continue to have a continuing need for training. But whether or not some of those training funds are mismanaged and are not really applied the way they should, and whether or not we should step away from it, are reviews that I will undertake to look into. I do share the sentiments that you have there in terms of the long-term continuity of this and the need to address that, but I'll look into that. You mentioned, of course, the emergency power project and wondered why up till now we've not been able to have a resilient delivery on that project. Well, my past work as GMB and MPC didn't cover power. We were only ancillary supporters of the power project through the provision of gas. But you will see, for example, that over the last 6 weeks, we've had a dramatic increase in the amount of gas passed on to power, and that is why you've reached the sort of numbers you've reached on a continuing basis. Over the last 2 months, you've had power averaging about 4,000 megawatts. A lot of that is coming from gas that is being propelled by MPDC. I do agree with you that they need to focus on the power project. It is important, it is the life wire of this country, and whatever I can do to support that process as minister, if I do get confirmed, I definitely will do, because the life wire of our country. You wanted to get a guarantee from me that when summoned by this august body that I will come. I don't even think it's an option. It is a matter of requirements of the law. But I will do better than that. I think my experience in the sector has been that the reason why you get a festive National Assembly sometimes is that ministers finish all their confirmations and they disappear, and you begin to chase around them to come and account. I have published my first monthly report in the industry within 6 weeks. It's not been done in about 10 years. I can guarantee you that on a monthly basis, these houses will get what I'm putting together now called the NNPC manual. It will be a manual that tells largely what is happening in the industry on a month-to-month basis before it is published. And you will therefore be abreast of developments in this sector well ahead of those developments. We started out reforming our system. We're doing a monthly publication. I'm doing a weekly podcast within NNPC. That weekly podcast addresses relevant issues on a week-to-week basis, and is stranded to every staff of the corporation. About 12,000, 13,000 of them. They receive that every Monday, and I've done that from the very first week that I resumed. I will continue that till December, and it should go to a monthly podcast. If I can do that, then be assured that a monthly delivery to you wouldn't be a problem for me. I have had a weekly session with the president, which is all documented. We'll continue to do that every week. And we've had monthly town halls. We've done one. We're getting ready for the second one. So I think that the requirement for knowledge and information is not a privilege that we give to Nigerians. It is a right that they're entitled to. And as long as I have any influence at all in this sector, I intend to ensure that that right is respected and delivered upon. Now, the other question Senator Ram asked me for on the 20 fixes. Why is it that excuse me. Sorry, I get confused with some of these questions. I think Senator Gershom, you did ask me on the local content drive what I intend to do on local content. Let me say that the local content board has done quite a lot of work. I think the previous occupant of that position did a yeoman's job, quite frankly, in terms of delivering on local content. We're going to build on that. And whilst they had focused substantially on the issue of contractual deliveries and personnel, we're going to focus a lot more on the issue of incentivizing and issue of investments. So it is something we're going to continue. Now we're going to begin to go into the hard knuckles. Most of the investments that you see Nigerian companies do have been largely in the peripheral areas of the oil sector. Now, but the reality is that the oil sector is moving. If you look at our statistics, a greater amount of petroleum is being produced, not from onshore facilities anymore, but from the PSCs. So we're going to have to encourage Nigerians and the banks and the financial institutions, and indeed, hopefully, one of the things we're looking at is a world fund that will be set up to assist Nigerians get into the very complicated adult levels of investment in the deep stream sector. But local contents will be relevant. However, whilst the local content drive will be essential and will be grown, we must find a way of harmonizing some of the rudiments of local content that have tended to slow down ability of the oil companies to go fast on approvals. So NNPC has got to work hand in hand with these companies to have parallel and as opposed to cumulative approval system. I have set a mandate for my people that approvals will have to come back from the 3 months average that you've noticed in the last 4 years, and then register and basically be handled within a 6 months period. That's a very tall order, and to do this, there's going to be a lot of complementarism between various agencies of government, and that's one of the things we're working on. Gershom, I think you also asked me how do I transit from a private to a public environment. Are there skills in the private sector, for example, that I can bring to the public sector? First is transparency. Some of the wild stories that I hear in the public sector are unknown to the environment in which I grew up for 30 years. And the first thing I need to do is to get out of it. And that's why you've seen that within a very short order, we've ordered PwC back to do a forensic audit of our earnings. We've been able to bring our management reports from 2010 to 2014, and that's helping the PwC new complete audit. We have been able to start publishing our monthly reports, something we're going to keep doing. So transparency is key. The other is speed. Speed is time. Time costs money. And there is some level of laxity sometimes in public sectors, thinking that if you just take your time, things will go away. We're going to have to instill speed because we're dealing unbelievably with a sector where speed is of essence and means a lot of money and means the difference between success and failure of a project. No, I think there's a question from Senator Kazim, basically saying, asking me, what am I, on the pipelines, for example, what is the holistic solution to pipelines? And what are we going to do? Well, I'm sure that those of you who have followed the press in the recent times have gotten to a position where we have gotten the army involved, we have gotten security and community involved. Can we invest in new pipelines? Very expensive, but that's going to be a private sector-led effort that we're also encouraging. The rot on NNPC I've already talked about and how we're unbundling that. I think that different from the 20 fixes that the distinguished senator mentioned, if you also look at my roadmap for the oil industry in totality, 20 fixes we're dealing with NNPC's problems. And therefore, community issues largely fall into the roadmap, for the oil industry. We have a book that I just brought up on the roadmap for the oil sector, which canvasses all that. But community is key. Without the community, there will be no oil. Unless you deal with the community, there will be festiveness and you will not produce. I think we're all too realistic experiences in terms of what has happened to this sector in the past if we don't do this. So community is key, and we have an agenda on how to deal and relate and converse and hopefully work cooperatively with community.
Senator Simone.
There are laws against gas flaring in Nigeria, which results to damage to health and the environment of the people living there as well. What do you think you can do, either to reduce this or to combat it? It is on. It is on.
A bit louder.
A mic is on. Laws against gas flaring in Nigeria. These activities still continues, which I believe it is damage to people's health and it is not conducive for people living nearby. What do you think you can do, either to combat it or to reduce it at all, for the safety of the people living around the place where you have gas flaring?
Senator Raju Rasaki.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, I'm Senator Fatima Raju Rasaki. I'm representing Ekiti Central. Dr. Kachikwu, I just have a simple question. What will you do on the issue of the NNPC supporter staff that been owed salaries for several months? There are NNPC staff that have worked for over 10 years without confirmation. What will you do about that? Thank you.
Senator Stella Adwa.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, may I start by congratulating my dear brother here. I congratulate you. I have a few questions for you, most of which I'm sure you're already working on. Number one is the inconsistency in policy, particularly the petroleum products distribution policies. Often you have a situation where we have a policy that will incur investments cost for those people who want to get involved in that particular distribution. But give or take 12 months within that time, you have a new policy that supersedes the one that has already been in place. I'm not sure how you're going to tackle that, but it's a huge problem.
and it would be good if you focus on that, i.e. people invested in constructing tank farms all over the place. But these tank farms are so disconnected that really they are not getting sufficient fuel to manage. Again, if you look at the privatization part of it, it will help you to create an effective and efficient distribution system. The second one I have is on contracting policy. It's often amazing when you have a local contractor competing with a foreign contractor. The local one borrows at 25%, the foreign borrows at less than 5%. And so they are supposed to compete. It's so unfair that really you don't get a fair competition going on in that direction. It would be good if you also have a look at that and have it reviewed. And for employment within the industry, it's been ongoing for a long time, and I think what is happening is because we lack the database for our skill gap. Now, are you going to review that to the extent that we have a skill gap database, and so you use it to address your host community issues and take into consideration their innate skills? For instance, if a particular...
Distinguished Senator, if you put the question...
I'm sorry. The last question I have is Houston. Houston is developed by the Chevrons of this world, the mobiles of this world. It would be good to leave such a legacy. Are you thinking in that line that we can have a Houston in Nigeria, somewhere in Niger Delta? I think it would be lovely. Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity.
Senator Rozoku.
This is a gender-sensitive Senate. Order.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President, for finally giving me the opportunity. Let me join several other Nigerians to commend and appreciate the GMD NNPC for the initiatives and what he has done so far. Let me also ask very quickly and write very quickly on what you have said about private participation in the downstream sector, especially in refining products, as a long-term solution.
Please order, please order.
As a
Let the male senators please listen to the female senators. Order. Thank you.
As a long-term solution to the perennial problem of availability of refined products. Indeed, government had recognized this fact when in 2002, it licensed 18 private refineries. None of them took off except one, the Niger Delta Petroleum Resources, which today refines only 1,000 barrels of crude for diesel. Now, government has again licensed 65 modular refineries. We want to know what guarantee do we have that this time around, that these 65, some of these 65 or all of them would work. Initially, what they said about the 18 was that the enabling environment was not there, including the regulated downstream sector, as well as feedstock at competitive prices and some other things. Now, as Minister of Petroleum that oversees the NNPC, what will you do differently this time around to ensure that these refineries work so as to stop us from further engaging in the subsidy regime that continues to drain away millions of dollars from this country? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kachikwu. Take those questions.
Distinguished Senator, I asked about staff salaries that are being owed for about 5-6 months. That is news to me. My salaries in NNPC are current. I'm not aware of anybody being owed salaries. On the contrary, you could accuse us of utilizing monies meant for federation accounts sometimes to pay salaries. That I can understand, but that salaries are being owed, it's not to my knowledge. Senator, distinguished Senator Sela Odo, you asked, well, you affirmed certain policies which I totally agree with. One is the petroleum policy inconsistency in the country, and I do agree with you. People get out and they make investments running into billions of naira, and if you can't keep policies consistent, then at the end of the day, they become companies that go bankrupt. We will intend to have a roadmap which is approved by the Federal Executive Council and His Excellency the President, and once we do that, we're going to be consistent. This President, I don't think, has a history of not being consistent, so hopefully, I'm sure we will keep to that. Now, in terms of the borrowing costs for local versus foreign companies, I think we need to have a clear demarcation of areas of operation, at least in an interim period. One of the things that you have is both local, like you rightly say, local and foreign companies competing for the same contracts in the different financial models completely. But we need to set parameters and say local companies need to be given a lot more access to, especially on onshore type contracts. You know, while we begin to push the very experienced, very heavily capitalized foreign contracting companies more into the deep offshore type environment. That, I think, will help compare oranges or oranges and apples or apples. Employment skill gap database, yes, absolutely agree with you. We need to develop that because one of the problems you're having within NNPC are those sort of skill sets. Over a period of time, you find a lot of people being dumped on the corporation whose skill sets really do not fit what needs to be done by those positions. We're reviewing those. We're going to see the gap analysis, not just for NNPC, but also for the entire oil industry. And that is certainly where my skill set go, for example, right now, some fabrication. And there are millions and millions of Nigerians who have absolutely wonderful skills in simple fabrication. We need to grow those. So we're going to find those gap analysis and try and drive those. Now let me go to the refinery question. A refinery, for me, there are certain processes that must be followed. One, the existing ones will have to be maintained. And if it means shutting them down to maintain them so I don't waste crude, we'll do that. Second, within the refinery environments, you have to commingle new investors who can have shared facilities in terms of pipeline, in terms of the excess power that they produce, and in terms of their tankage space. Three, you will need to look at modular refineries. At the end of the day, whether we accept it or not, destroying the local refineries that you see because of illegality may well be a first reaction to bring sanity, but ultimately you've got to create and harness the technology that those people have developed over a period of time and be able to put modular refineries in areas where they can provide work for people, get them out of the festiveness of attacking pipelines and stealing crude, and so we need to address that. Now the difficulty has always been that most people who apply for licenses, they get the licenses, they have not looked at the financial modeling, they have not looked at the business modeling. It is simply a thing of the current, you know, to have a license. They get it, and that's when they begin to do the analysis of whether the investment is worth it or not. Some do it because they want to get allocation of crude, and once they get allocation of crude, they stop there. We will have to already have a business plan and can deliver on those business plan, and that's where business integrity comes. Ultimately, it's only that solution that will solve some of the refining problems that we have today. I can take that quickly if you want. Yes, the reality is that that's been going on for a while. The new technologies are helping. We're going to continue that process. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago I got a reply from the team which is beginning to show first indicative geological surveys that are showing that oil may well at last be found in Chad. So we're getting some very useful information over the last 1 year, and we're going to apply a lot of energy and resource using modern technology that is available in this sector to try and harness on that. I do agree with you. If you could find crude in Chad, why we're not finding one right beside us there in Nigeria? But I think it's not from want of trying from every historical record that I've seen, but I think technology makes things possible that were not possible before. Shell, for example, is a given example of that.
My name is Ben Murray, Bruce Biosecurity. One, illegal refineries. The Niger Delta, there's a great deal of pollution taking place in Niger Delta, environmental degradation, because the young kids are busting your pipelines, they are getting your crude oil, they are bunkering, they are producing refined products from your crude. Now, the reaction of government is to blow up these pipelines, to blow up these illegal refineries, put them out of work, so we have sometimes in Bayelsa 90% unemployment, environmental degradation. Would you be willing, the government, NNPC, to provide crude oil at a subsidized rate to these kids so they can refine these products using a modular refinery process, put them together as communities like what Awolowo did in the West, and make it possible for them to refine products. So one, they have employment, they have a job, they can pay their fees, look after their families, but more important, they protect the environment. One, it is cheaper to protect the environment than to blow up these refineries. Okay? Second issue. The federal government is subsidizing consumption. Bloomberg says we spend sometimes $7 billion subsidizing consumption. It may drop to $3 billion now. It makes no economic sense for the NNPC to subsidize consumption. Now, I want to put you on record that when the budget comes out for subsidizing consumption, I'll be voting against it, and I will urge my colleagues to totally vote against it because it makes no economic sense. That is what I'm saying.
Put the question.
So the question is, I'm putting your notice, I'll be voting against it. Now, I hope when the budget shows up, you will not be asking for us to subsidize consumption, and I urge you not to. Thank you.
Senator Chusani.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Nominee, I just have two questions. The first one is on the issue of abandoned projects by the NNPC. In my constituency, there is a petroleum institute that was built, furnished, and was abandoned. That is one. Secondly, I will take you on some of the measures you have taken since you took over office, which is the sacking of some staffs of NNPC, which you euphemistically said rationalization. Now, what have you provided for those persons? Because I had series of complaints from them. And again, I want you to make a clarification about the exploration of oil in the north, particularly in the Benue and the Lake Chad region. Thank you.
Minority Leader.
Will you please go to your seat? According to the rules of the Senate, you cannot speak from anywhere except from your seat. Thank you very much, Minority Leader. You are the best.
I'm sure you are surprised the President members.
No, I'm not.
Your Excellency, the Senate President, my colleagues, I just want to ask two questions. First, let me commend the President, President Muhammadu Buhari, for going outside party line to bring people of credibility and integrity that can help the economy. Dr. Kachikwu is one. He's somebody you cannot say is in any political party. So the question...
You answer your question.
You are from the south part of Nigeria. And we from the south. I don't know whether my leader, general manager, will have the opportunity. That is why I'm commending the President on behalf of the south for finding you fit. Now, the question I would like to ask is that when you were speaking,
you made mention of the fact that already you have started the unbundling of the bureaucracy in the NNPC. If you are confirmed by this Senate as a member of the Federal Executive Council, will you also support presidential initiative to also unbundle the bureaucracy that has eaten up the expenses of Nigeria, making it 78% recurring expenses and only 22% capital expenses on a yearly basis? Reason why we are saying that is that about almost 622 federal parastatals exist with directors general, in addition to 36 ministers, and the DGs are almost like ministers. So the result is that we have heavy weight, and the federal government has taken on things that they ought not to, like like super primary school education, all sorts of things, borehole, the same thing local governments are doing. If you want to release money for capital project, from my experience as a governor, you cannot have recurring expenses of 75% to 80%, and then you have 22% for capital project, and then you expect to have real life. Then we are talking semantics. So I'm asking that as somebody who has been in the private sector, as somebody who has already started the initiative to release money for major projects in the NNPC, will you support the federal government to unbundle this system, reduce the weight on recurring expenses, reduce the number of directors general, reduce the idea of one ministry having 9 directors general, and by implication 10 ministers, so that this country can have money for capital projects? The last I would like to ask is, now you are here before us, standing as the Minister of Petroleum. If you are confirmed, you are now a GMD, you are a nominee. If you are confirmed and you are given Petroleum Ministry, will you take phone calls from governors and senators in future? Because we have had experience where even myself, serving as governor of an oil producing state that produces over 750,000 barrels of crude oil a day for Nigeria, and had the onerous task of ensuring the protection of the riverine area. You were a vice chairman in ExxonMobil. I was not able to speak to a minister of petroleum in this country for 3 years. And also I want to ask you, from what time to what time? Justice. Anything that will you ensure from what period to what period was that? Yes. From what period to what period was that? Are we not talking about change? No, I'm just talking. What period to what period? Now. Period to what period? Then if you are talking about, will you make yourself accessible? Will you make yourself accessible to stakeholders? These senators who are here, including the ones on this side, and then governors who can give you advice that will move the industry forward. Because if we are running a mono economy, what happens in NNPC automatically happens to Nigeria. And I just want to give you information, sir. For 7 months, we had no single revenue from NNPC in the federation account. We used to have
order. Please let the minority leader ask his question. Order.
In your short stay as GMD, have you been able to make contribution towards the federation account? Because we had a period where for 7 months we had zero allocation. We're sharing money only from customs and from Federal Inland Revenue Service. This was when you were Can you tell us what you have done to improve it? Now, on a monthly basis, we have no money coming in from NNPC at all. And so the state became broke. And then most of us left frustrated as governors. We could not complete our projects. What have you been able to do in the last 2 months to change the paradigm? Those are the questions, sir.
Thank you, Minority Leader. Senator Nkwi.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Suleiman Nkwi. Mine is a straight follow-up question to one of the questions that were earlier thrown, but with direct clarity on the issue of subsidy, an issue that we all agree is a double-edged sword. Under the current agenda of change, of course, we definitely believe
there is a lot of issues surrounding the item of subsidy. One can talk endlessly when a government wants to attack from the heart the issue of corruption. Certainly, the issue of subsidy is a very germane issue. My question directly to you, honestly, what is your position and what is your state of mind on the issue of subsidy? Do you, as a follow-up, or will you support the policy of maintaining subsidy? Or will you come up with options of abolishing subsidy? If it is the latter, that is, you feel it should be withdrawn, to my mind, what are the palliatives you believe Nigerians may demand, and what the government may carry as palliatives for the removal of subsidy? Lastly, again, to that question, if in your own opinion it is to be maintained, what are your readiness and state of mind to convince this Senate, and indeed, of course, Nigerians, that it is worth to maintain it, and how you are going to clip all the issues surrounding corruption around the issue of subsidy. Thank you very much.
Dr. Kachikwu can take those questions.
First, on the issue of subsidy, because there's a lot of interest in it, let me deal with that first. If you ask anybody from the private sector whether he thinks subsidy should remain, I think you're going to get a categorical no. And so there isn't a, you can't embellish that. But having said that, and I think in my conversations with His Excellency, the President, he understands that, he gets it, he's been the petroleum minister before. But one of the things he's very deeply worried about is if you take away this subsidy without adequate plan on the palliatives, like you just mentioned, what is going to be the impact on the populace? And so we're having a continuing dialogue on this. I think we're both determined that at some point in time, given the sheer effects on the national economy of subsidy today, something will have to happen to subsidy. But we're doing a couple of things. First, we're doing an analysis in terms of subsidy at what number? Do we consume 40 million liters like the data says, or do we consume 25? We're just bloated numbers. My 6 weeks there is showing me that I'm closer to 30 million liters than I am to 40 million in terms of the actual number of million liters of fuel. And so to that extent, that is already a 25% drop in the subsidy number. Then we have the cost in terms of demurrage. Can we be more efficient and wipe that out? Because that's about a 25% factor. We're looking at that. Then you have the bank interest. Now, if we can find a financing mechanism that enables us to fund as and when due the interventions by independent marketers in this stuff, that's also a reduction. But at the end of the day, the problem with subsidy at the end of the day is that if you don't handle it well, without the palliatives, you have a response. Some of the things we're doing is, what are the palliatives? National health scheme touches every Nigerian. Railway development all over the country touches every Nigerian. Power development touches every Nigerian. Transportation, subsidy at transportation points in terms of cost of transport, subsidy in motor tickets or whatever, or transport tickets. So we're looking at all kinds of palliatives. I think my understanding is that the President is a lot more minded in attacking subsidy once you have been able to deal with the palliative issues, rather than simply yanking it out. So my duty in the short term is first to continue that dialogue and get him comfortable with it. Two, and I think he knows where I stand on this, but two, and more important, to also be able to help him develop a comfort factor on those palliatives. Then 3, get subsidy to a level where you can say that this is the actual cost of subsidy, because there's a lot of fraud that went into the subsidy scheme. If you strip it of the fraud, what really is the subsidy? I mean, if at the end of that analysis, for example, we find that the subsidy element is not more than 10 naira, the question anybody will ask you is 10 naira too much an amount to give to your citizens? And can you fund that subsidy through other mechanisms? But if it turns out, as the data are indicating currently before the research, that you're subsidizing products at about 14 naira, clearly the effect on ability of state governments to be able to do, the loss to FAC and the ability of state governments to do their work becomes unbearable. So there's first a research that needs to happen, there's a dialogue that needs to happen, and we're going to get to the end road of the game. I think we're all alarmed by the effect of subsidy, and he probably a lot more than I do, he carries the executive mantle on this. So rest assured, distinguished senators, that is something we're working around the clock. Now, my distinguished Senate Minority Leader, Emmanuel, I'm very fond of, did ask me about unbundling. Will I support unbundling of bureaucracy at the federal level? Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. And I could even stop there. It is that germane. And I think the President is very committed to that. Now, the first test of him trying to do that was to say he was going to appoint less ministers. But the rules didn't let him do that. But I think that was the first signal he gave that he was sick and tired of the multifariations of agencies. So I think in the process of unbundling, this distinguished Hollow Chamber also has a responsibility. The responsibility to look at the laws that pertain to these issues and help fashion laws and changes in laws that will enable those unbundling take place. I was challenged, for example, in terms of the individuals that I let go and what have I provided for them. These sort of arguments are also going to happen when he unbundles. What happens to the 5,000 or 10,000 federal government staffers that are going to be let go? We must have a process, which is what we're doing in NPC now, of how do you retrain, how do you rekit, how do you retool, how do you provide facilities for the individuals who were let go. But if we continue to be tied to the prison yard of no changes because of the ramifications of what makes business sense, this country will grind to a halt. And so we have to be bold enough to take the political will to do the changes. And in any revolution, you will have individuals who may well be innocent in the process of a change. But that's the way it is. If this was a private company, that's the way it will be. All that you owe your staff will be, how do you ensure that in their going process, their entitlements are well paid, their retirement packages are well paid, and by the way, NPC has one of the best retirement packages in this country. So, with every due respect, distinguished Senator, I hear your emotions. We are doing the best we can to have standards on which these decisions are made. But without those decisions, I'll be here explaining to you in 6 months' time why nothing has happened in NPC. Exploration in the oil in the north, I think I already handled. Whether it's Benue, whether it's Chad, I think I already dealt with that issue. The one on gas flaring is key. I am very, I mean, apart from being somewhere from the south, for whom the environment is a major concern, gas flaring cannot be a commercial way of dealing with issues. And so although we've approached gas flaring from a position of penalties for flared gas, we need to begin to look at taking away flaring from a position of investment in the translation of flare to money. To stop flare, you need investments. A lot of that money is not there. So we need to provide a national master gas plan, which must be gazetted, a gas plan which must be